What's going on, everybody? Jumping on here today to review NFL draft expert Dane Brugler, 7 round mock draft for the Athletic. Specifically, going to go over the picks that he made for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Dane's one of the best in the business. Had a chance to meet him for the first time in Indianapolis at the NFL Combine. Tremendous amount of respect for his work. And also just think that anyone that's willing to crank out a 7 round mock draft and put in the time that he did deserves recognition. But I do think that this haul is actually pretty realistic from a Steelers perspective. Plus, it gives me an excuse to talk about some draft prospects, which is kind of, my favorite thing ever, as you guys know. So just before we get started, a couple scheduling notes for the next week or so. Nick Fairball of Penn Live, my guy, is going to be joining me on the channel on Friday to talk Steelers and NFL draft. I'm excited to link up with him, talk some ball. But if you guys have specific questions or topics that you all want us to cover, want our answers on, prospects, anything like that, drop those in the comments and we'll try to get to as many as we possibly can. Okay. You guys could like the video, sub to the channel, turn on notifications, all that stuff would be greatly appreciated on my end. I got a lot of content for you guys planned over the next week. I'm really excited about that. I'm planning on streaming next Thursday and Friday before nights 1 and 2 of the drafts. Same thing that we did last year. I'm really excited about that. But hopefully you all will, join me, come hang out, talk some ball. But let's get to Dane's mock. He has the Steelers taking Colorado quarterback Shedeur Sanders at pick 21 overall. This is something that's gained a lot of steam over the past couple of weeks. If you guys are really interested in a really deep dive on Shedeur and his game, I did a 2,700 word article or something like that with plenty of film examples on Shedeur's game, full scouting report stuff there. But wanted to give you guys like the cliff notes on just my thoughts on Shedeur as a player. But some of the things I like, 6'1", 212 pounds. So he has average size for the position, unflappable toughness in the pocket. He's willing to stand down the barrel and take big hits and still throw the ball down the field. Some examples of, him seeing a cover zero look pre-snap, and they'll have a free rusher off the edge, which the quarterback is responsible for, and still being willing to take a shot, still push the ball down the field with good accuracy. So I just like that about Shedeur. He consistently, picks himself off the ground. He's competitive. You could tell he wants to win. So I like that. There are some examples of him cycling through progressions at a relatively high speed on NFL concepts. So things like Y cross or bow concepts. I provided these examples, some of which on Twitter earlier in the week. But just him understanding how to read defenses, I think, is actually a strength in his scouting report. When defenses would throw exotic looks at him or specific coverage rotations, 2-1, 1-2. I felt like he read those things fairly well. I think having Travis Hunter on his team was obviously a blessing in a lot of different ways, but an underrated kind of asset of that is he saw a bunch of funky looks in college just because of people having to get really creative to try to take Hunter away. So, but I think that Shedeur is a pretty smart quarterback. The kind of selling point of his scouting report that I think everybody talks about, just sharpshooter accuracy to the first and second level of the field. The ball just hardly ever hits the ground. This dude hardly ever misses any layups. Not only is he accurate, but he's precise. And I always think that there is a notable difference between those two distinctions when it comes to passers. Being accurate is more about completion percentage. Are you giving your guys a chance to make plays on the ball? Being precise is hitting them in stride and not causing them to lose any momentum or any steam out of the break. And that's something I like about Shedeur because he allows his guys to get plenty of yards after the catch. In terms of weaknesses, I think that these have been relatively well covered as well through the cycle. He is a bit of a habitual drifter in the pocket. He sets really deep. He kind of makes life difficult for his offensive line. Now, his offensive line was really poor over the past 2 years, so that is notable. I just think that there was some, I want to say some skittishness at times just because I just don't think he trusted the environment he was operating within. He doesn't generate a lot of velocity for tight window throws, needs to understand or gain a better understanding of how to generate more torque from his lower half. He's not a really rotational thrower. He's more of a linear thrower. I do think that fixing that, having somebody to work with on that could be really beneficial for him at the next level. Pretty middling athleticism. He was hogged down by defenders from behind several different times in college. He's not going to be a guy that's going to be a huge creator at the NFL level. So he's going to be winning from the passer. And I do think that he shows the want to play like that at times when the ecosystem provided him an opportunity to do that. Not enough anticipatory throws on tape. I already mentioned kind of the velocity thing. It's kind of well documented that he doesn't have this really powerful arm. He's going to have to be a guy that wins with anticipation. Just because of some of the drifting and some of the footwork in the pocket, he's not always in a ready to throw state. So that kind of hindered him from being a really, anticipatory thrower, but I do think he can get there because there are examples. You look at the Nebraska game specifically. When I went back and watched him again for the article, the Colorado State game is kind of everything that you want to see. So if you're a Steelers fan, you're trying to figure out like, okay, do I really want this dude as the quarterback or the face of my franchise for the next several years? Could he be the guy for to kind of get them out of quarterback purgatory? Go watch the Colorado State game. If that is a player that interests you, that is like what he could look like at the NFL. I think the difficult part of his eval is that the environment he was in was really, really poor and not really the player that he's going to need to be in the league is not the player that he was last year or even the year before in Colorado, which I think makes for some difficult conversations, some interesting conversations. But I do like the mental makeup, the toughness, the processing, the accuracy, a lot of things to like with Shadur's scouting report. But with the second pick that he has the Steelers making is Dylan Sampson, running back from Tennessee. Reminder, the Steelers don't have a second round pick because of the DK Metcalf trade. Sampson is 5'8", 200 pounds. Quick feet, jump cut ability. He ran a 4.42 40 at his pro day. This dude definitely has some good breakaway speed, but he's way more than an undersized speed back. I kind of thought that I knew what type of player I was going to be watching when I went to pop on his film, and he's just totally different, and I was pleasantly surprised. He runs with great tempo. He's an expert at allowing pullers to engage, setting up second and third level defenders. They ran a lot of counter and power concepts. Like he's actually a pretty decisive runner. In between the tackles. He has a really low center of gravity. He can get skinny in between the holes. Pleasantly surprised also by his balance. He has this kind of weird thing that he does where like he'll get to the second or third level and he'll be trying to brace for a tackle. And he just kind of spins off of guys and keeps his momentum moving up the field to create some yards after contact. Size is what it is. No really reason to talk about that. Like he's going to be a smaller back. Scheme fit's going to be murky, I think, just because I mentioned like a lot of gap scheme concepts in college. He faced a lot of light boxes. If you've ever watched Tennessee, they got the receivers practically lining up on the sideline. So it's tons of space. There's like 5-6 guys in the box. It's just not going to be like that in the NFL, especially in this system, which is a lot of heavier personnel. You're going to be facing, heavier boxes, things like that. Didn't run a lot of wide zone either. So that's kind of a question mark I have for me transitioning to Arthur Smith's offense. Too many fumbles last season. A little careless with the football at times. I think he had like 4 or 5 fumbles, something like that. Real big questions like what's the passing game impact? Was kind of underutilized as a receiver, mostly just like a check down option at Tennessee. Can he be more than that? In the 3 to 4 games I watched earlier, I think I scouted him and finished my report on him in January. But whenever I watched him, there were some games that were good in pass protection, some games that necessarily weren't. So it was a little bit inconsistent up and down from a processing standpoint. Of course, the size is going to be something he's going to have to overcome. But I do think that Sampson is a guy that I have like kind of in that third round range. There's a huge cluster of running backs in the third, fourth round range, a lot of which have came in for visits to see the Steelers already through the pre-draft process, Sampson being one of them. But I do think that Sampson at this point in the third round does make a lot of sense and provides pretty good value. And I also just think one of the reasons I liked this mock draft, I wanted to do a video on this is because I don't think Dane necessarily probably meant to do this, but a lot of these guys have made pre-draft visits for the Steelers, and just seeing Omar Khan's kind of track record over the past 2 years, how many guys have made pre-draft visits that ended up being selected, and then Beanie Bishop as well being picked up as an undrafted free agent. There is like a good correlation. So these guys are definitely worth, talking about. So fourth round pick, he has them taking Jordan Phillips out of Maryland. Interesting player. Haven't been linked to him too much, but I do want to talk about him. He's 6'1", 312 pounds, 32-inch arms, so shorter arms, but a solid overall wingspan. He's going to be a 21-year-old rookie with untapped upside. This is one of the youngest players in the entire class, but one of the best players I saw during the East-West Shrine Bowl. When I was preparing for that event, I got my eyes on him beforehand, was excited to see him there. I actually thought he looked pretty good in the one-on-one pass rushing drills and things like that. Really heavy-handed. He can reset the line of scrimmage. There's a rep in the Indiana game where he's actually laid off the ball. He's working as a nose tackle in that zero technique. He's laid off the ball, but he's in a 4-point stance. He just kind of launches himself into the center, lands his hands in the dude's chest. He just blows him backwards, detonates him 2 to 3 yards in the backfield, and then gets in on the tackle behind the line of scrimmage. Just kind of a good idea of like the type of power that he can generate. He's a powerful fella, mostly a gap control player, but I do think that he has adequate first step quickness to kind of get into gaps. You will see him occasionally try to backdoor plays. He's got an arm over move, can sometimes surprise people with that when they're bracing for more of his power attacks. Good finisher. He was credited with 20 stops last season. Pretty much all those came against the run. But he didn't miss very many tackles. And like one of the themes we talked about in the defensive tackle rankings that we did for the channel is that there aren't a lot of good finishers in this class. It's just one of the realities of it. So I like that he finished when he did get in the backfield. Some of the negatives I had for him in his scouting report, he's kind of a segmented pass rusher. And what I mean by that is like, doesn't always come off the ball. Like for one, he's consistently late or tardy off the snap. Like he's just not ready for the play to start. Doesn't always show like a good pass rush plan originally, and then it does take him a while to kind of get into the second phase of the rush later in the rep. So that's something that I would like to see improved on. I think that was one of the reasons for such little production over the past several years. He had 16 pressures last year, 10 pressures in 2023, 0 sacks. So it's just like the pass rush production has been really poor. Could it be better at the next level? Yeah, he's definitely a young player. He's pretty raw. He's pretty raw overall, I would say. I actually thought that, after going back and watching him again earlier today, I actually think that this is a guy that probably should have went back to school, but maybe somebody that you have to bring along a little bit slowly, but could potentially provide some pretty decent upside as like maybe even a starter down the line. But a rotational player early on, like I said, most of his snaps came in the A gap, like mostly probably going to be a nose tackle would be my guess. But next player in the 5th round, he has them taken Elijah Roberts from SMU. This is another guy who pre-draft visit, so good connection there. He's 6'3", 292 pounds. He's bulked up since the end of the season. 34-inch arms. He was primarily an edge defender in college, sometimes worked as a spinner. So what I mean by that is he would align in a 2-point stance over the guard in the B gap, to try to rush the passer, standing up from that alignment. But I do think he's going to be a 3 technique at the next level, certainly for the Steelers scheme. Pass rush production, we mentioned that was lacking in Phillips' profile, not lacking in Roberts. This dude had like credible high pass rush win rate. I've seen that stat all over my Twitter over the past couple of months. But 60 pressures was tied for 6th best in the FBS. That's definitely notable. He's got a defined toolkit as a rusher. Like he knows how he's supposed to win for his body type. And I do think that level of understanding has allowed him to kind of reach his ceiling at the college level. He has a cross chop that he lands pretty consistently to win the outside shoulder. Most of the time he was able to get to the outside shoulder. It was with finesse. He does have a club swim to kind of jump back inside when rushers would kind of overset or get their shoulders turned to the sideline. He can convert speed to power with the runway. I didn't see it as much in the reps where he was aligned more inside. So that's one of my question marks. Can he still generate that amount of power from such a tighter alignment where you don't have as many reps to kind of explode through? So that's one of the things I'm kind of looking for with him. But he can lock guys out on the edge, force the ball back inside. So you definitely see him like be able to control his run gap assignments. But again, like what is that going to look like inside? Not super explosive off the ball. Like I said, most of the outside shoulder wins were due to finesse. I just don't think he's going to be able to keep tackles off balance. And one of the reasons I think he needs to come inside. Not super flexible through contact, doesn't bend well through contact either. Like I said, with the additional weight, I'm not really 100% sure what he played at last year, but what does he look like with this additional mass on it? Is he still going to be a decent enough athlete for NFL standards to make an impact? And also, like, he was just a poor finisher last year. Like, he was somebody that had a huge missed tackle rate despite relatively consistent production. One of the things I do like about Roberts is when he did get into the backfield, he was always searching for the ball. And I do think that's one of the underrated traits for pass rushers is, fumbles I don't necessarily think are as fluky as maybe like interceptions could be for a defensive back. Just because I do think that certain players, when you see them do it 3 or 4 different times, it kind of clicks for me that they're actually actively searching out the quarterback's hands to rip the ball out. And turnovers, that's the name of the game. You want to take the ball away from the offense. So next player, 6th round pick. This is an interesting one because I actually didn't watch him fully. I have a decent understanding of like who he is just from like live viewings, but I actually scouted his teammate more, Elijah Badger, but it's Chim Dike. From Florida. He's 6 foot, 198 pounds, 9.282 relative athletic score from our guy Math Bomb, 4.34 40-yard dash, 1.51 10-yard split. This dude can really burn. And I think it makes a lot of sense when you start to kind of like watch his film a little bit more. You see why they would be interested. Lots of production on runway routes, crossers. He just pulls away from defenders like super easily, not just safeties, but like legit slot cornerbacks in the SEC. He would just run away from them. Has some route salesmanship to him as well. I think back to the Tennessee game, he had this nasty corner post route in the red zone where he got a free release, got up on the safety, kind of stemmed him outside, crossed his face, worked back to the inside, created a ton of separation. Safety looked like he was stuck in the mud, but plenty of difficult catches on his tape. Like he can track the ball well over his shoulder. He can high point the ball. I think he actually has maybe a little bit wider of a catch radius than I would have previously anticipated, just given his like size profile. Good effort as a run blocker as well. That's something that the Steelers are kind of lacking right now in the wide receiver room. I actually think that they could use somebody that could come in and do the dirty work. Does DK have the mass to do that at the NFL level? I would be interested in seeing if he could. Like I said, I do think the college tape, Florida's receiver coach, I don't know who it is, or it could be a different guy this year. But Ricky Pearsall was the same way last year. Pearsall, another guy like DK, was a transfer into the Florida receiver room. Those guys just block with the tremendous amount of effort. And like even like Pearsall, I kind of question on whether that was going to translate because he was so rail skinny. But I do think that a sign of being a good teammate is just how well you block for your teammates in the run game. And I think that DK certainly does that. He did return punts last season as well, was a team captain immediately after his arrival on Florida's campus. So I think that's notable. Couple things with him. He is an older prospect. He's going to be a 24-year-old rookie. He's got an almost 11% career drop rate. So maybe making some of the more difficult catches, but haven't always made the easy ones, the clean ones, if you will. Very modest overall college production through 5 seasons. Like he's averaging about like 4 or 5, like less than 500 yards a season through 5 years. So it hasn't always been there. He's going to be a very specialized player at the next level. I feel like maybe like a supplementary piece. He doesn't really necessarily have experience covering kicks. So that's one of the things, like if you're going to be, the 5th guy in a receiver room, like you're going to have to play all 4 phases of special teams, or at least specialize in some area as a gunner or something like that. And then just my real big question with this, which I'm sure is not really going into Dane's like thought process, is like they already have multiple guys like this on the roster. They have Calvin Austin, they have Rowan Wilson. That's kind of like what those guys do. You get them like free releases and allow them to run those runway routes because of their speed. So I do think it's a little bit repetitive, but again, we're talking about 6th round. Yeah, so I do understand the pick. Last guy, Carson Bruner. I actually think that this was really funny. Just because the Steelers they like those NFL bloodlines. 6'1", 220 pounds, plenty of range as a linebacker. For you young bucks that may not remember or weren't alive to see it, but Mark was actually a tight end for the Steelers in the 90s when I was a kid. So again, NFL bloodlines, 4-phase special teamer. I went back and looked at some of the numbers. 8 tackles on special teams in 2022, 2023. So you talk about some of these like 6th, 7th round guys, ways to make the roster. That's how you do it. Impact on special teams. That's the way to do it. Only seen one game of like full tape against him, and I just popped on the USC game earlier today. But he was actually pretty good in that. He picked off a pass as a spot dropper over the middle of the field. USC was running a little mesh concept. The over the ball kind of sat down at the sticks. He read the quarterback's eyes, got the passing lanes, and then another play. They ran a little play action concept. Initially, he takes a couple steps towards the line of scrimmage, robots out, follows the crosser over the middle of the field, ends up getting a pass deflection. Pretty good. You guys know how I feel about PFF coverage grades, so I'm not going to go into that whole rant. But he is a really well graded player in coverage. I'm kind of curious on like if that's actually legitimate or not. I will watch a couple games probably before like day 3 of the draft, just because I do anticipate that there will be some interest, like whether it's in the 7th round or priority free agent. Like I do think that there's a potential landing spot here. Wasn't super impressed by like the change of direction. I don't think like when I saw like the shuttle and 3-cone numbers before I popped on the USC game, I was like, oh, like this dude he just might be an undersized like freak athlete. I do think he's like a pretty linear athlete, like more of like a straight line speed guy rather than a guy who's going to be able to kind of sift through things, change directions and things like that at the next level. But again, that's Dane's mock draft. I really appreciate you guys tapping in with me. Again, Nick and I will be back. Nick Fairball and I will be back on Friday. Nick Martin and I will be back on Monday for the podcast, and then plenty of draft content coming next week. So I'm really excited to get all of that stuff to you guys. I will check you guys soon. Peace and love.